Welcome to the Art of Healing podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to helping you connect with your mind, body, and spirit. This is Charlize, physician and Reiki master, and thank you so much for joining me. I would like to remind you that although I'm a physician, the information you receive in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. You can find my full disclaimer at my website, www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. If you like what you hear on this podcast, sign up for my weekly newsletter. Check your show notes for more information and for the link to sign up. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to the Art of Healing podcast. This is Charlize. And for today's podcast, which is anxiety number 3, now we'll get down to the interesting stuff. So we'll explore the blocks in the energy body according to the Ayurvedic system of chakras and how that relates to the experience of anxiety. I have previously done similar podcast episodes where we explored the chakra blocks in insomnia. We explored the chakra blocks in weight gain. And we explored the chakra blocks in depression, I believe. So just as a brief overview, the Ayurvedic system of healing uses an energy system that's based in our human anatomy called the chakras, which is also known wheel of light. And in humans, there are believed to be 7 main chakras, starting with number 1, the root, which is located very low in the base of the pelvis, the sacral chakra, which is number 2, the solar plexus chakra, which is number 3, which is located like above the belly button, below the chest. The 4th chakra, which is the heart chakra, which is located somewhere in the center of the chest. The throat chakra, which is located in the throat. The 3rd eye chakra, which is located deep in the brain, likely in what's called the pituitary gland. And then a chakra that exists just outside of the body that connects to the higher self. So, and as I did before, I was thinking about it. I should provide something because we all learn differently. But I think it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have a PDF that I'll attach if you're interested, so you can have a reference point for these. There are PDFs for some of the other chakras, but I better do one on this one as well. So we'll cover each one of these just as we did in the other podcast. And then we'll discuss my interpretation, my experience being a physician as well as a Reiki master, and what I've noticed in my patients and my Reiki clients as to what happens in these energy centers that leads to the experience or diagnosis of anxiety. The first chakra, which is the root chakra or Muladhara, which is located very low in the pelvis, somewhere between the pubic bone in the front and the tailbone in the back, and is believed to be one that you can't directly touch because of its location internally in the body. And it's associated with our connection to earth, with ego, with feeling rooted in the here and now. What I have observed as far as what's happening in that energy center in someone who is feeling anxious is going to be unrooting or not being rooted. So to explain that, the root chakra and its location, it's the energy center that governs the legs, the feet. So it's felt to be our connection to earth. And even in a meditation practice, if you've done some of those meditations will sometimes direct you to envision roots from your feet into the earth. And many schools of thought, many experts relate this energy center to our ego. Not ego like, oh, I'm better than you. No, not that ego. It's the ego of existence, of your place in the here and now. So what seems to be happening, my observation is that individuals who are suffering from anxiety often are not connected to this energy center at all. They often don't have a sense of connection to their feet or legs. They often are unrooted, which allows them to move through life faster, move through life quicker, and along with the other symptoms of anxiety, because they aren't feeling that connection to the here and now and just the core of Earth, that feeling of floating, free floating, or even like dizziness or just, going off somewhere. So that feeling of unrootedness is best dealt with, well, a number of ways, but definitely any sort of energy focus that we can do to ground our energy, grounding. So you may have heard the term grounding, and that's when you want to envision roots coming from your lower body. If you're seated, like if you're seated cross-legged in easy pose, your roots would come from every part of your lower body that's attached to the floor. Or if you're standing, like in mountain pose, your roots would come from the bottoms of your feet. By rooting and taking our attention from the head, which we'll get to that is overly powered up and energized in meditation, and bringing it down into the legs, that can be a quick way to bring us into the here and now and to refocus our energy. And it does help to put the worry thoughts aside. And then in a way, if you can stay in that rooting sort of exercise, it may even help those worry thoughts to dissipate. So the root chakra in anxiety is typically unrooted. And so I guess we would say it's probably definitely blocked in that way. The second chakra, the navel chakra, which is associated with the reproductive organs because of its location in the pelvis, usually somewhere around the reproductive organs in women, and basically just somewhere in the lower belly, in front of the spine, behind the lower abdomen, is our chakra that's associated with our sex organs, reproduction, our relationship to others, and our ability to experience joy and laughter. My observation of what's happening in the sacral chakra in the experience of anxiety is usually that this area actually has too much energy. It's actually over-energized. And the result of that, the sensations and experience that'll come from that are often related to issues with the bladder, urinary tract infections, urgency. Now, what would be different from this in this area, even though it's overstimulated, so you might imagine that like, well, why don't you have something like hypersexuality or, overly engaging in sexual activity or something like that. I'm not quite sure. I'm thinking that because the vagus nerve, the wandering nerve, its connection in the pelvic region, and it's the way it connects to the organs. In the vagus nerve, which is an entire topic, at some point maybe we can get to it when I figure out how to do that. But the vagus nerve will carry information from the parasympathetic system, which helps with overall rest, relaxation, restoring, in the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight system. So as far as an energetic medicine, what I'm imagining must happen is that the sympathetic system is overly stimulating the sacral chakra, usually the bladder, so that individuals that are dealing with like a chronic anxiety, maybe not even so much the anxiety attacks like we felt in our first anxiety podcast, often will experience the bladder being overstimulated, frequent urination, a feeling of needing to empty the bladder. Keep in mind, this is separate from, the medical issues we might deal with in the bladder. We're just talking about sort of the experience of it, but it's pretty often that many individuals with anxiety often experience the bladder being overstimulated. So in the second chakra, we're saying, my interpretation is likely this is overstimulated in the form of just the bladder. It is understimulated as far as usually the sexual function, which is why we typically see libido being affected by chronic anxiety and sexual function being severely affected by anxiety. This is one place where often my male patients will first begin to engage with their experience of anxiety because they are suffering from issues with libido, with maintaining an erection, with having intercourse. And this may be their first real awareness that they're having deeper issues is in this area. The solar plexus chakra, or Manipura, which is located in approximately the area where the stomach is located. So it's going to be the governing energy center of our digestive organs, including pancreas, liver, and spleen. And then I roughly associate our intestinal function as well with the solar plexus. So in the first anxiety talk, we were walking through what's happening in the body during chronic anxiety and even with like severe an anxiety attack. I had mentioned that one of the changes the body will go through when it's getting the stress signal in the brain is to divert blood flow from the digestive organs to the arms and the legs in anticipation of a physical threat. So what this translates to in energy medicine is that the solar plexus, primarily, I interpret it as going to be blocked, where we're actually not getting enough energy to that region, primarily because of the nervous system and its interaction with the blood flow. So the body is actually trying to crank this system down. So what that means is that in the daily, weekly, monthly experience of anxiety, that digestive issues probably will occur in the form of pretty much anything from abdominal pain that's difficult to diagnose, to nausea, to vomiting, to diarrhea or constipation. And this is all because the digestive system, which still has a job of acquiring energy for the body to run, so eating and digesting food, and likely it's still going to be doing this even during the experience of anxiety, but now it does not have everything it needs in terms of blood flow and oxygen from the cardiovascular system. And so this creates a block in this area. In my Reiki practice, I have noticed at times that in this region, if I'm working on a client, that they'll often feel very cool in the solar plexus area. That's my interpretation of there's not enough energy flow there. So in terms of anxiety, we probably aren't getting much of any of that prana, that energy flowing into the solar plexus. So it creates a block. The next energy center, which is the heart chakra, Anahata, is located, of course, in the chest, probably where the heart sits. And this energy center, which is our center of love and is thought to be our main energy body's contact with the external environment, actually coming from the heart, not as we perceive in the West, as like from our eyes or our head, actually coming from the heart. In terms of the energy that's happening in chronic or even severe anxiety. This one I find a little harder to interpret, although I'll probably say it's both blocked and it's both overstimulated, and it probably oscillates between the two. The reason why I say blocked, because part of the anxiety that's experienced at the base of it is going to be a chronic daily underbreathing, chest breathing, so that the person, as they're breathing, isn't using their diaphragm or their solar plexus very well, and is taking short, shallow breaths, which, because the lungs aren't expanding fully, is sending a signal to the heart to actually beat a little faster or beat a lot faster than the natural baseline that it would beat at. So that's part of the block, is the short, ineffective breathing, either from posture, learned habit, number of reasons. During the first anxiety podcast, we did the anxiety experience, which we slouched to sort of cave in the chest and limited the lungs from breathing. And then I would say that varies or changes in terms of then being overstimulated. And the overstimulation part is going to probably come during an actual anxiety attack. And that's when we get that major release of the adrenaline hormones that puts the body in overdrive. And at that point, there's going to be lots of energy delivered to the heart, because it's going to start to beat fast. It's going to send signals to the arteries to dilate and go kind of like, open up all the engines in full throttle. And that, in terms of anxiety and in someone that's not anticipating that overstimulation, of course, is extremely crushing and overwhelming to have the heart pick up speed. And that overstimulation part in someone in an anxiety attack, often, even once the peak of the anxiety attack has calmed down, the heart racing will keep going for a while, just sort of reinforcing that block, or that overstimulation, sorry. And then also just a reminder of those stress hormones that were released, they're not going to go anywhere until they've broken down and done their job. So in the heart chakra, definitely we perceive that as both being blocked and then at times being overstimulated. The throat chakra, as I was thinking about, each energy center, what role it plays. From my experience, my interpretation, I don't know that energy blockages, it's very major. Probably with chronic anxiety, there's a block being developed in the throat chakra. But for the most part, my interpretation, the throat, which it's going to be around the thyroid gland, in the neck, and with these energy centers, we believe are going to be deep in the body, so somewhere near the spinal cord rather than up front. We don't probably have so much of a major energy disruption there. The energy probably flows pretty freely in the anxiety experience through the throat chakra. Now, I do interpret that, like, over time, chronic anxiety, that, well, maybe there's not been awareness of it for years and years and years, probably does develop a blockage there that disrupts all of the energy and possibly disrupts how the thyroid functions. But I think in terms of just the generalized anxiety that may have recently recurred, probably not too much of a blockage there, although this is the energy center associated with communication. But for the most part, my interpretation, as I gain more experience and more insight, I'm sure I'll probably have to revise this, but at least from my experience right now, I don't know that there's much of a blockage or an overstimulation in the throat chakra. The third eye chakra, which is the energy center that's in the brain, and it's deep in the brain, so it's past all the typical brain tissue and sits around what's called the pituitary gland, which is our master gland. So my interpretation that in this region of the body, this is where the primary disruption is coming from. I do think the root being unrooted plays an important role. Definitely the solar plexus being disconnected is important. But primarily, the driver of chronic anxiety, of anxiety attacks, is likely coming from this energy center. The third eye chakra, which governs our master gland and also governs our senses, is likely going to be extremely overstimulated, and not in a good way so much. I know for a lot of people, as they're learning about some of these energy medicine topics, they're often wanting to learn about opening up the third eye and its connection to extrasensory gifts and perception. But my interpretation in those that have anxiety is that they are relying very much on this third eye, and not in a good way. So their senses are often keyed up. One of the key findings in anxiety is the pupils being dilated. So of course that's sense organs from the eyes. Also, people with anxiety, and then with much worse conditions, even like PTSD, often the sense of tuning into hearing and being extremely tuned into what they hear, to the point that even small sounds will make them jump. A very important tie to how that creates anxiety. So my interpretation of what happens to the third eye is just very overstimulated. And when I'm working with both patients and Reiki clients, often what seems to be the first go-to is we actually want to dissipate some of this energy. We don't want it all there so much. And that's one of the ways that we can calm the rest of the nervous system. And as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, by rooting, by having some kind of exercise, we root visually or root ourselves physically, that can help to dissipate some of the energy out of the third eye, down the legs and into the feet. And a lot of the yoga poses, especially in beginner's yoga, is to do that, to help root and get some of that energy out of that area. Finally, the last energy center, common energy center, is going to be the seventh chakra, which is the higher self, which is thought to exist above the head, maybe about 5 to 6 inches above the head. It was believed to be the connection to the higher self, the higher source, sort of your spiritual antenna. And physically, because it exists outside of the body, it really doesn't have an association with any of the organs or the glands. And in deep meditation work, it's often where we're working. So in someone that has anxiety, the what I interpret is happening is the connection to the higher self is blocked. It's not there. And reason being is that because of the overpowered third eye and all of that energy that's going into thoughts and worry thoughts and all the bits of information that create from there, it typically, for the person experiencing that, it blocks anything else that can come in. So of course, depending on your belief system and your spirituality, your higher self may be your connection to Jesus Christ, to God, to Allah, maybe your connection to your higher soul or Akashic records. I won't interpret that part for you. That is definitely, your distinct. That's your belief. But the thing with having this connection, and I'm sorry, even for atheists, that higher self would be your connection to your higher self, the wiser form of you. So in the midst of anxiety, that connection will be cut off, so that any calming energy or information that could have come from that higher self chakra is going to be blocked by the third eye being so overpowering, generating so much energy. And often what I interpreted is that in the midst of anxiety, with that third eye being so powered up, it's draining the other energy centers. So it's definitely drains the higher self, the higher chakra, so that if there were insights, solutions, things that could help calm the worry, they're going to be blocked off, while that third eye is powered up and it's just taking everything it can from all the other energy centers. So once again, that's my interpretation, and I hope that is helpful for you. Keep in mind, this is my interpretation based on my experience as a physician and a Reiki master. I'm sure there's probably some resources that may validate or may contradict my interpretation, but I just wanted to offer what I have experienced in treating others as far as what's probably happening. And like with the other topics, it seems that, and the feedback that I've gotten is that as we approach this problem and we start to sort of piece it through by going through the physical anatomy and the energy anatomy, it becomes a little bit easier to understand what's happening. And it becomes easier, even in your own personal approach, to decide if something needs to happen next, how to do it. So once again, thank you so much for joining me. And this is going to be the conclusion, at least for now, for this anxiety series. In the show notes, I'll put some additional details. And if you'd like, I will include a bit of a landing page, which if you'd like to submit your email for some free resources. For this one, and if you've listened to these 3 podcasts, I have a collection of emails that I've created, which is the 21-day meditation journey. It is based on an e-course that I created. And for a bit of time, if you are interested and if you're needing some assistance or wanting some assistance with getting started with meditation, or you're just maybe wanting some, like a daily reminder or something to help, if you want to sign up with your email, you'll receive a short meditation exercise that you do every day. It'll come daily to you for 21 days, and it will help if you're wanting something to get you back on the habit, back into the habit, or to introduce the habit. These are all short, simple exercises. They can be done by anyone. And then since they'll be in your email, you can save them. So if you don't get to them, you can come back the next day. So I like to offer that freebie for your time with me, because this podcast and the other 2, they were pretty dense topics. And for the other freebie, if you prefer and you want just like a short resource and you like to just have something to look at and keep moving, I will attach a landing page for an ebook that you can download by submitting your email. And so that's just going to be some why to get started with meditation if you have not, or if you want to have, maybe you meditate, you want to have something to send to others, feel free to download the ebook and forward it to anyone that might need it. So those will be in the show notes. And then of course, my website is always available for resources. So thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your time. I hope this has been helpful. As always, feel free to leave me any kind of feedback. I have mentioned before that although I'm a practicing physician, I'm definitely not a media mogul. I'm not a professional podcaster. So if there's any sort of information you'd like me to know or feedback, definitely please share with me in your comments. And I will be joining you next week, in which we will discuss for this topic. Probably won't be for everyone, but if you are on the verge of considering training in Reiki, I'd like to just offer some tips for what to do to get ready before you start your training. Thank you so much, and until next week, bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Art of Healing podcast. Once again, this is Charlize. You can find out more about me at www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. Did you know I have a blog as well as online courses? Check your show notes to sign up for more information about healing arts, health, and wellness. Thank you. Please feel free to share this episode with your friends, family, and loved ones.